in the form of a pilot agreement that binds the school district, that binds the county, and binds the city.
Exactly. So in that case, going with Indelible's really good faith, would they be willing to change the agreement in the case of a reassessment if we would also increase the pilot? Would they be willing to do that?
No, because they can't, because the entire structure of this depends on fixing taxes for the future. They have at their option to go into court and get the entitlement to pay no taxes whatsoever. We're avoiding that by making the offer to pay the 85 or 86,000 a year now. But they need that predictability and certainty, just as I think county benefits by the predictability and certainty of receiving 86,000 a year.
I appreciate that. And just like the weather, you know, with reassessment, that's about as unpredictable as Tropical Storm Henri. And I just want to know, again, if you'd be willing to take that back to the principals, if they could consider that, you know, in time of our next meeting 2 weeks from now.
Well, I'll certainly take it back, but because of the complexity of the transaction and because of the requirement for certainty, I can't imagine there's going to be much flexibility. So I don't want to give you any false hope.
Oh no, I don't trust any hope around this place, but I do appreciate the honesty and the candor. But what I'm looking at here again, you know, this looks like a really wonderful thing. I appreciate the goodwill of Indelible, but again, we have to do our due diligence here and make sure we know all the nuances of such a deal going forward. Well,
before you, Mr. Haas, the school district did the same thing and the city did, and they came to the same conclusion, which was this is a great idea. So hopefully you will too.
Many thanks, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Other questions, Mr. Organ?
Just one last thing. I mean, like the last paragraph, I mean, on the resolution, I don't, you know, feel that we as council should send this over to the county manager and the office of law. I mean, they can negotiate it, but I think it should come back to us as a finality as far as a vote, not just sign off, you know, the kind of sign our rights away or our powers away to them to agree upon the terms, and then them just putting those terms in place without us doing a final vote on it. That's not how business should be conducted within the county. We are a legislative branch of government. I think, you know, we kind of control some of the purse strings here. And there's, at this point, I have a huge issue with the county manager being an attorney herself. You know, not, quite honestly, technically speaking, we by resolution 2016-50, she's still the chief solicitor and an acting county manager. There was nothing that took her out of that role, and then she obviously put in an acting county manager in a position where a seat's technically not vacant. So, I mean, I have a huge issue as one member of council with the conflict of interest. So,
is there a question?
Well, I think that it needs to come back to us for a final vote. I don't think that we should just, as a county, eventually just vote on this, approve it, give it to the county management and the office of law, and say, okay, they're allowed to sign off on the agreement without come back to here in this legislative form to sign off on that final number.
I didn't draft the resolution, Mr. Urban,
Right.
So I can't answer any questions with regard to the resolution.
Well, I understand that. But,
Okay, I thought you had a question.
But what I'm saying is I think from internally speaking as a council, that this needs to come back to us for a final vote after we see the agreement. Not have, you know, throw our power back to the county management, the executive branch, give them all the power to negotiate this contract and then sign the pilot. And we don't know what that number is going to be then. They could say $10 and it could be $10. Yeah, I mean, I know that that's not going to be the case, but that's basically how I read that language. If we just simply give up our powers as a board of 11 to the Luzerne County acting manager and the office of law, they can come up with any number and sign off on it, and we're stuck with that. That's
Mr. Chair, I didn't mean to interrupt Mr. Urban. I thought it might save some time. The Office of Law has no interest in, nor would we change any terms that were not consistent with what council wanted. Our role, the scope of our review of this would be that the language reflects council's wishes. If there was any proposal that changed any of the substantive terms, it absolutely would come back to council. And I know Romilda is on the same page with that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely agree.
There is absolutely no way that council would be giving up any of its authority over this. I speaking for the Office of Law, we have no interest in increasing our responsibility in terms of governing. We would review the document, make sure it's consistent with what council wanted. Any proposed changes that are not consistent with that would come back to council.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions?
Sure.
I got Perry. Mr. Perry.
Attorney Hogan, I'd like to thank you and Indelible for coming up with this plan because it's a whole lot better than we have right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, sir.
Anyone else?
Mr. McGinley, it's Walter.
Who was that, please?
It was Walter, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, to Mr. Urban's point, the resolution clearly does say that, and I'm sure we can change that resolution. That's not a problem. This isn't for Mr. Hagan. This is just a point of interest for council. It says that now therefore be it resolved, Luzerne County hereby authorizes the Luzerne County Manager and Office of Law to negotiate and sign the aforementioned pilot agreement to fix real estate taxes for all future years. I think that's the point that Mr. Urban was trying to make, that we could, if we could correct that language in the charter and just take that section out where it says Luzerne County Manager and Office of Law. I think that's
Okay.
his issue, but hopefully I'm speaking correctly on his point.
Attorney Hagan, I would think Wilkes-Barre City is probably thrilled to see some of the provisions that Indelible's offering to provide up there.
Having met with the mayor, the fire chief, the police chief, Chief Delaney in the fire department, the city is thrilled. And if you guys give us this opportunity, you'll see a complete transformation of a project that's been neglected for years, where the quality of life for the residents has been impaired. This is going to be something transformative for the community at large.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Thank you.
could.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, again, I sense we're bringing this to a close here, but again, Mr. Hagan, look, I appreciate Indelible personally, and yes, it does look really nice. Again, we've got to understand human nature, we've got to understand the times, and I even agree with my colleagues' stance that, yeah, this is a wonderful development. Again, however, we're talking about projecting 40 years in the future, and any business entity wants to be as sure and minimize risk as much as possible. So it's really unfair that we're going to minimize Indelible's risk at the expense of Luzerne County and the taxing bodies. Now, I understand. I take the same stance when we have these KOZs and these LERTAs in other parts of the county. So I'm just being very consistent here. And I'm saying I plan to bring an amendment in 2 weeks to say that this pilot will be subject to increases if there is a reassessment or if things change. If we look at 40 years ago is 1981, $84,000 in 1981 was like $1 million. Inflation has gone, it's currently going through the roof thanks to many bad government policies, but it's inevitable that we're going to have inflation here. So I just hope you can understand where I'm coming from. And I want you to please take this back to the principals. Let's try to get consensus here with the council instead of just getting a couple of votes that think this is just a grand idea, but not really doing the homework and really making sure we get the best deal for the taxpayers. Please take it back. I plan to make this amendment next time. It may or may not get support, but nonetheless, we have to do our due diligence as well, and we have to minimize our risk, just like Indelible or any other good intentioned entity out there. I hope you understand where I'm coming from.
Oh, Mr.
Okay.
McGinley?
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
McGinley, it's Walter. If I could weigh in one more time real quick.
Walter,
I just want to tell Mr. Hagan that I do appreciate the effort from Indelible. That's been a problem property for years and years and years. The ability for us to clean that up, remodel it, I think is a noble effort on your client. I think it's great and wonderful that we could do that for Sherman Hills. and finally get that issue behind us. I know it's been an ongoing matter, and I really appreciate the fact that this company is going to come in and dump a couple $1 million in that property, clean it all up, provide security, and address some of the issues that we've had over the past probably 2 decades that I can remember. So it's just very, very important that we do that. And to just sum up my comment is the only concern that I have, and you could send me an email, is, and I don't see anything in the agreement that protects us if Indelible sells that property. And I know you said they probably won't, but at some point along the way, I think we need to protect the taxpayers of the county if in fact that gets sold to somebody else that is a nonprofit, that they don't just walk away and say, well, we don't have to pay the 86,000. That was another agreement. So if you understand my question and can respond to that, that would be helpful.
Well, under Pennsylvania law, when a not-for-profit owns property, it cannot sell the property because the asset has to be distributed to another non-for-profit. So you don't have that risk because the law is in place to protect that once it's in the hands of a qualified not-for-profit enterprise, it cannot be transferred to a for-profit enterprise. If it does, it has all sorts of adverse consequences, financial, tax, everything. So Pennsylvania is protecting the citizens of Luzerne County with that law.
Thank you.
Yes,
You don't have that.
I understand that, and that's exactly my point. Mr. McGinley, I'm not finished. I am not
That's
finished.
fine, Mr. Griffith. We've had a thorough discussion many times.
And I'm
over.
not finished with part of my discussion. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Mr.
you
Hagan.
were finished 3 times, Mr. Griffith.
Well, I'm not finished. You don't tell me when I'm finished. Mr.
I can tell you
Hagan,
if you're out of order.
excuse me, Mr. Hagan. I apologize for my outburst. I just wanted to ask you, as your point was just well taken, that if it gets transferred, it has to get transferred to another nonprofit. And if another nonprofit takes it, they have no obligation to pay the $86,000 tax per pilot, as we've agreed to, correct?
No, it's incorrect because they're going to be bound by the same contracts that are in place, which require the pilot in the first place. So this is all interconnected. It's all interdependent. Nothing's going to happen to this property for the next 40 years, except that it's going to be substantially improved and the quality of life of the residents is going to be substantially improved.
I appreciate you clarifying that. That was exactly my concern. And if that's exactly the case, then I don't have to be concerned about that then. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mr. McGinley? Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
It's
Yes,
Sheila
Ms.
again. I was on mute before because I really tried to comment to Harry. Harry, I understand what you're trying to do, but this is a nonprofit. This is not a for-profit industry. We get a lot of benefits from the revamping of this community that can't be measured in dollars. And the assessment, of course, is going to go up. They are making millions of dollars of improvement. That's a given. But I can't understand why they would ever change this agreement. They need the certainty. And it does wonders for our taxpayers without the dollar sign.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I can,
You know,
you don't got to do the you don't got to do the brush away. Like I hear you. I understand the tangible benefits. I really do. But we've got to understand the maximum exposure here, and we've got to look long term. Any government entity, any business entity would do the exact same thing. That's all I'm doing.
no.
We want the best interest of all parties involved here.
I
Oh, come on.
disagree with you, Harry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Reagan. Sorry.
Yep.
Josh and Josh.
Good
Want to
evening.
Introduce yourselves, please.
Sure, yes.
Jared, could you put the PowerPoint up on the screen, please? Josh, you just want to introduce yourselves and tell us a
Sure.
little bit about while we're getting the technical side worked out.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm Josh Longmore. I'm the Executive Director of the Luzerne Conservation District. This is Josh Glace. Josh is our plan coordinator from Larson Design Group. And of course, you know Matt Jones, who's been helping from the county side with this countywide action plan. So I appreciate the opportunity to present that. Are we ready from the technical side?
That's a good question. Is Josh got that up, please? Gentleman in the back there.
I can continue with my introduction while they work on it. Josh will go through the slides.
All right.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present this draft countywide action plan for clean water. Josh Glace will provide a review of the specific components of the plan here in just a moment. But I just did want to provide a brief explanation of why we're here today, what this planning effort is. About this time last year, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, approached the district to develop a plan that would focus on identifying local water quality needs and ways of addressing those needs locally. This request was part of DEP's larger Phase 3 Chesapeake Bay Watershed Implementation Plan, which outlines the state's strategies to meet federally mandated nitrogen and phosphorus pollutant reduction goals that the federal government has set for the Chesapeake Bay watershed, Pennsylvania's portion of the Bay watershed. And those goals, Pennsylvania is obligated to meet by 2025. So as part of that statewide effort, DEP asked local stakeholders throughout the 36 counties throughout the Chesapeake Bay portion of the watershed in Pennsylvania to develop these county-based clean water action plans. These voluntary plans are intended to provide local stakeholders the opportunity to identify and quantify current water quality improvement efforts that are already being undertaken, and also to develop wish lists for future projects that could achieve those locally identified goals. So at the beginning of this effort, DEP promised to provide guidance and technical support to the local planning team if we had agreed to take this on. And I have to say they've made good with that promise through both their Chesapeake Bay office in Harrisburg and also their Northeast Regional Office. They've had a few members from their regional office sitting on the local steering committee. And in fact, those members are also residents and taxpayers of Luzerne County. So after consulting with and getting the consent of County Council and Mr. Pedri late last fall, the Conservation District Board volunteered us at the Conservation District to be the lead local entity for this planning effort. Over the past few months, the district and our consultant have worked with local government leaders and community stakeholders to develop this draft plan. Councilman Griffith has been involved throughout the plan development process as council's appointed representative, and Matt Jones and Eddie O'Neill have been actively involved on the steering committee and in stakeholder meetings on behalf of the administration. In a moment, Mr. Glace will be presenting some of the specifics of the plan, but in short, I'm glad to report that we're presenting a plan that will meet our local goals for water quality while significantly exceeding the pollutant reduction goals that DEP established for Luzerne County. As we developed this plan, which included multiple meetings with local stakeholders from the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, we were guided by our overall goal of developing a realistic plan that does not increase regulatory or financial burdens on the county, other local governments, or the residents. We accomplished that goal and had the added benefit.
So at least I didn't deep six your letter.
We had the added benefit of strengthening communication among the stakeholders, confirming that a lot of good work has been done already in the county and is currently being planned by many parties to maintain and improve our local water quality. Besides helping our chances to get future state and federal grants to implement the practices that we've identified in this plan, this effort has also strengthened partnerships that will continue benefiting the natural resources of Luzerne County for many years. So with that said, I'd like to again introduce Joshua Glace He's an associate project manager for environmental services with Larson Design Group.
Thank you all for having me here. If we could move the slides on the PowerPoint, that's working.
Next slide just came up.
So the second slide here is what Josh Longmore presented, what the countywide action plan for clean water is achieving, looking at obviously county government, Northeast Regional Office undertaking this voluntary action. It's helping throughout the phase 3 WIP of the Pennsylvania WIP. So next slide, please. This is just a small overview. It's a county-specific plan for reductions in nitrogen and phosphorus specifically, but also improving overall water quality and soil health within the Chesapeake Bay and Luzerne County. Is a fluid document. This is not a hard set document. It will be reevaluated through midpoint check-ins throughout the life of this document from now through 2025 as its implementation goes on. What we want to achieve, these 3 items were brought by the stakeholders and the steering committee here in Luzerne County of what we'd like to achieve throughout this plan, not only the nutrient load reductions. They'd like to not only have nutrient load reductions with overall improved local water quality, improved communication and cooperation amongst stakeholders and local partners, and identify more opportunities within the county to improve local water quality and soil health as well. Next slide, please. These are the numbers that were provided to Luzerne County from the Chesapeake Bay Office of DEP of what the county is responsible to meet their nutrient reduction goals. 231,000 pounds of nitrogen and 47,000 pounds of phosphorus. Next slide, please. What we've then taken, the bulk of the plan, which we provided to the planning and priority initiative sheets. These sheets outline the goals that stakeholders have identified throughout the process of meetings that we've held since March with the steering committee, with local stakeholders, and then narrow down into specific focus groups within the county. These are designed to achieve the initiatives through the 2025 timeframe, and those numbers were then added into a model to calculate what those reductions would be. So now we'll jump into what the actual initiatives are. Next slide, please. So we've identified 4 different sectors that we're looking to improve the water quality here in Luzerne County. We have the agricultural sector, urban developed stormwater, wastewater, and overall watershed health. Those are the particular sectors we've looked at, and we have a specific focus group for each sector that has outlined the initiatives that we're going to highlight. Next slide, please. First is actually the agricultural priority initiative. Agriculture is a big part of Luzerne County here in some of the more rural areas. So what we've outlined for the sector to achieve those goals is nutrient management planning, assisting farmers when they're applying fertilizer and manure on their lands, making sure they're getting the most current up-to-date information for their operation to not over-apply those nutrients. Bnp reporting and verification. A large part of this project is understanding what BMPs are already in place, making sure they're reported correctly and making sure they're functioning as intended. Existing BMP maintenance program. This is looking at BMPs that the district, NRCS, other partners would have implemented 10, 20, 30 years ago, making sure they're still functioning up to par and making sure they're functioning as intended. Fourth, riparian buffer and stream fencing. Riparian buffers are a key component to overall stream health and water quality within the county and across the Chesapeake Bay. There's a lot of programs out there providing trees at low cost or no cost to entities. So we want to provide that to farmers, and also fencing their animals outside of streams so that those nutrients do not have direct access to streams. Fifth is an initiative that was completed back in the 70s, and we've had interest from stakeholders to bring it back. It's manure to mine lands. This would be using excess manure from farmers and putting it on abandoned mine lands, which are nutrient deficient, to encourage vegetative growth and encourage less erosion and less nutrients going directly to the stream by having more vegetation on those lands. And it would also be taking manure that might be spread excessively on ag lands and putting it to good use. Third, wetland creation and enhancement across agricultural lands. This would be looking at wetland areas that might be farmed or are in poor condition on ag lands and reinvigorating those, maybe taking those out of production and returning those to wetlands, because wetlands are probably one of the best nutrient reduction features of the landscape. Next, soil health improvement. This is an initiative that's going to be continued from the Conservation District. They're partaking in cover cropping and soil health initiatives already through partnerships with other counties, and we'd like to continue that throughout this process as well. And then last, barnyard agricultural BMP implementations. This is looking at barnyards, making sure animals and runoff is being collected, treated, it's roofed, there's proper gutters, curbing, making sure there's no direct discharge to streams from those barnyard areas, which is something the Conservation District and NRCS are doing very actively currently. So we'd like to continue that initiative. I'll solicit any questions on the agricultural if anybody has. Okay.
I don't think we have many farmers in the room.
So next slide, please. Moving on, we have the Urban Developed Stormwater Priority Initiatives. We've identified several initiatives here. We've identified MS4 community partnership projects. Currently, MS4 communities within Luzerne County are completing projects as part of their MS4 permits. We'd like to piggyback on those projects by helping them and enhancing some of those projects to continue to get credit and additional nutrient management reductions. Instead of reinventing the wheel, just helping each other, adding that collaboration. Our next thing is collecting data for existing and planned.
Question for
Go
Josh.
ahead, Mr. Haas.
Yeah. Hey, Josh, thanks for the presentation so far. The MS Community Partnership Projects. I just want to know, since you'll be helping out with this again, what I love about the Conservation District is it's voluntary and it's not binding, but you are there to serve the community and come alongside our agricultural community and other people in the area with vested interest. Question is, does the levy authority, does the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority then, if you're going to partner with them, are they willing to give some of those funds to the work of the Conservation District? Because we know you guys are hard strapped for funding many times. Is it on the radar at all?
It's not, we're not asking for any of those funds. Mainly this component of the plan is really just making sure that there's communication with us and them on the projects that they're planning, so that there's not any redundancy in the kind of projects that either the Conservation District or any of the other partners are pursuing, if they've already been pursuing that. The other component of this goes along with collecting their data and making sure that's getting accurately counted and reflected in the Chesapeake Bay computer model, which is generating these pollutant credit numbers. So we have kind of a second, if you look at the overall tables that we included, which are the main component of the plans, under Priority Initiative 2.1. 2.1 is the MS4 Community Partnership. 2.1A is that data collection. So it doesn't, we don't see necessarily an opportunity for the Conservation District to get any funding from what we would be doing with WVSA. We wouldn't be giving significant services to them because they're already undertaking their own projects. We're really just looking at enhancing the communication to make sure the projects are that we don't have anything to offer to enhance the projects, and also that we're aware of everything they're doing so that there's no redundancy, and that we're not pursuing a grant for a project that they intend to do in 2 years or something like that. So it's more or less that regard. And then, like I said, the data collection is so that we can make sure that in this voluntary plan, we collect the data from the MS4 communities and everyone else out there who's doing work, and making sure it's getting reported back to the Chesapeake Bay program and the EPA, so that Luzerne County and all the entities within Luzerne County get the credit that's due to them. But no, I don't think there's probably an opportunity for us to pursue funding through WVSA with this initiative.
No, thanks, Josh. Thanks for what you all do.
All right, Josh, continue.
Like Josh Longmore said, the second part of that is collecting data for existing PRPs within those MS4, making sure they're getting counted and categorized within the Bay model accurately throughout that. Thirdly, we have residential stormwater management programs. This is actually getting stormwater management on residential properties in the sense of rain barrels, rain gardens, so that individual properties can assist in managing their own stormwater, which would not overwhelm storm sewers, and also reduce retention time and nutrient reductions. Rain barrels are a great source to water people's gardens, flower beds. There's a lot of different BMPs that can be accomplished through that particular initiative. Next, we have nutrient fertilizer planting for turf grass areas. Currently, agricultural operators are highly regulated for the nutrients they're applying to their fields. However, large turf grass areas do not have the same regulations, such as golf courses, larger mowed yards and areas. We have found out through this process, golf courses do have nutrient management plans in place based on their own financial certainty to make sure that they're not over applying or spending additional funds to maintain this. However, we'd like to capture those and also get that further education into entities to make sure that they're just not going out and purchasing an excessive amount of nitrogen or phosphorus or for other fertilizers to be applied to these larger turf grass areas. Next, existing stormwater BNP retrofit and maintenance. This is also looking at older stormwater area, basins or management systems that are in place for 10, 20, 30 years. Stormwater standards has changed drastically, even in the last 5 years. So this would be looking at those older systems and bringing those up to standards by retrofitting them, and so that they can increase the nutrient reduction potential and carrying capacity of stormwater. And last is urban green space planting. This would be looking at urban green space that's currently turf grass or mowed yard, and maybe adding tree planting, meadows, wildflower gardens, taking it out of just an area that to increase infiltration and increase nutrient attenuation in those current spaces. Any questions on the urban and developed stormwater priority initiatives? With that, next slide, please. The third is the wastewater initiative. Through our discussions with the Chesapeake Bay office and our Northeast regional team, there's not a lot of opportunity here in wastewater. So what we've looked at is private septic and sewer maintenance, looking at individuals that have residential on-lot systems, gaining education, proper maintenance, what they should be doing, educating new homeowners on how to maintain those systems to increase longevity and the functionality of those types of systems by regular pumping, things of that nature. And then we're also looking at reporting of on-lot septic BNPs. We received numbers from WVSA that they received, I think, 7.3 million gallons of sewage or septage from haulers. Not all of it's from Luzerne County, but so there's a substantial amount of septic pumping that is occurring, which all has nutrient reduction, which the county would be getting credit for throughout this plan. Any questions on water, wastewater? Next slide, please. Our last initiative is watershed health. This is looking at the overall watershed of Luzerne County and individual watersheds and how we can best manage those. First is AMD treatment for nutrient reductions. There are existing treatment facilities out there that are receiving nutrient reductions from them. So we want to make sure we're capturing those. And if there's any new technologies that are occurring, we can implement those on those existing treatment systems. Stream restoration. This is looking at stream bank stabilization, channel stabilization. Obviously there's a lot of erosion. We want to take care of the streams that are happening here in Luzerne County and continue to build upon the work that's already being done by the district. Next, riparian buffer development. This is looking at riparian buffers outside of an agricultural setting, looking at it on private land ownership, potentially people that own woodlands that want to enhance their buffers, people that own larger residential lots that have a stream running through them, continue to build those buffers and educate and protect those. Next, we have farmland and forestry preservation. This is preserving the farmland and forestry areas, or forest areas here in Luzerne County. There's an inherent nutrient reduction by having those farmlands preserved and proper planning on them, but also having forest lands preserved as well with forest management plans, so there's not excessive timber harvesting. And when it is harvested, it is done in a responsible manner. Next, we have AML reclamation, planning, and AMD restoration. This is looking at new areas of abandoned mine lands and AMD or acid mine discharges to continue to do the work that Luzerne County has been doing from the legacy coal mining that has occurred in the area. Next, we have the reporting and verification of existing BNPs. This is making sure we're capturing all the credit for the work that's currently being done and will be done as part of this plan, especially AMD and AML work. That work is currently not being captured in the Bay model, and there's a lot of effort being done by DEP and the counties within the EPA to get proper credit for the nutrient reduction that's occurring by that current work. Last, we have wetland enhancement and river shore line improvement. This is continuing work that the district has been doing with water willow, creating wetlands for wildlife habitat and moving on. Obviously, those have huge nutrient benefits going forward. So Any questions on the watershed health initiatives here? Next slide, please. The last part of the plan is the programmatic recommendations. This is an area of the plan where the county and stakeholders can make recommendations or changes to current guidance, regulations, programs, anything that might be hindering the process of them achieving these goals moving forward. So obviously, as Josh said, this is voluntary. We're not looking at any regulation changes, but we're looking at changing programs to make it easier to complete some of these projects and make funds more readily available as well. So next slide, please. These are the programmatic recommendations we've come up with as part of this. Changing program standards for the Chesapeake Bay Program Technician. The Conservation District has opted out of the Chesapeake Bay program within DEP, which they would be required to inspect farms and offer some type of enforcement. They've opted out of this because their work is a technical entity for farmers and they want to maintain as such, and they've lost that funding. The suggestion has been brought up that they would create a tiered approach similar to the Chapter 102 erosion sediment control position, that if you would not do inspections, you might get a smaller amount, but you're still receiving that funding so you can hire people and continue the work of the Chesapeake Bay program there by not even just offering technical assistance instead of actual farm inspections. Next is access to DEP, EPA, DCNR, and NRCS existing projects and location amounts. There's a large database within the Bay model. Practice Keepers, Pennsylvania's data collection source of where all these BMPs are entered and how it's being reported back to the EPA. Currently, there's no good way to look at that data, whether from the district to NRCS to EPA. We're not sure what's going on, who's entering the water, how it's being captured. We're looking for a more user-friendly interface and a potential dashboard system that we can see so work is not being duplicated and man hours are being wasted by multiple entries of the same BMP. Which goes into second two, is creating that dashboard within Practice Keeper. That's a state-run program. That would, an individual from the county could go in there and see that another entity entered that particular BMP within that, and would be a lot more user-friendly moving forward. Next, increase the prevailing wage thresholds for conservation BMP projects, including dirt, gravel, low-volume road projects. Currently, there's, I believe it's a lower threshold for prevailing wage, which then increases the overall project costs. I believe the state has increased thresholds for municipalities, but they did not increase it for the dirt, gravel, low volume roads. The increase to this threshold would have more dollars available to have more projects being implemented, not only in the dirt, gravel, and low volume road program, but also agricultural BMPs as well. Next, we have an education and outreach position for water quality efforts to public and municipalities. This is a position that I know has been on the wish list for the district, but somewhat to coordinate between all the partners currently doing water quality and soil health initiatives throughout the county. Right now, myself as a CAP coordinator, we're coordinating, but the county's looking for somebody more permanent to continue those efforts because there's a lot of people trying to achieve the same goals, but not everyone is always collaborating as they should. This position would be more of a centralized hub of information and could keep track of that and potentially attach projects with funding with in-kind services and so on and so forth to continue the good work that this CAP is, or this action plan is outlining. Next, we have dedicated staff from DEP or conservation districts to verify and report BMPs. Like I said, there's an extensive amount of BMPs that are out there. Each BMP has a credit duration. Once that credit duration is hit, it is removed from the model and needs to be re-verified and reported. There's currently not enough staff to be doing that, and we're looking for funding from the state to either hire someone at their level or allow the district to hire someone to continue that reporting and then the verification, making sure that BMPs are functioning and then re-reported going forward. And then lastly is reduce the burdensome requirements for large-scale state grant programs. There's a lot of grant programs that require some type of match, whether it be cash or in-kind services, which when you get into larger projects up over $100,000, $250,000, that match can sometimes be 25 to 50%. Landowners and projects have a hard time coming up with that. This would be looking at basically a percentage to a maximum. For example, it might be a 20% match up to $20,000 so that those larger projects have the feasibility to be implemented because traditionally larger projects have higher nutrient reduction capabilities. Any questions on any of the programmatic recommendations we're proposing as part of this plan? Next slide, please. As Josh Longmore stated, Luzerne County has well exceeded their nutrient reductions. As nitrogen, they've exceeded it by 301%, and phosphorus for 249%. Next slide will be a breakdown of what those results are. As we stated at the beginning of the presentation, Luzerne County's reductions were 231,000 pounds of nitrogen and 47,000 pounds of phosphorus. What they've achieved is that's a breakdown by sector of how many pounds they're actually achieving throughout each sector. So it's obviously 3 times as high in nitrogen, 2.5 times for phosphorus. So I represent 6 counties as part of this process, and Luzerne County is the only county that's achieved 100% based on these reductions. So kudos to the county and good work that the Conservation District has been doing going forward. So next slide, please. With that, the next steps, as Josh said, this is a draft that's very far along. We're meeting with our last focus group later this week. We will then be finalizing these planning sheets that we've sent to you by just critiquing, adding some additional detail, resources that might be needed, whether it be technical, financial, a couple performance targets, and putting some cost estimates to some of the projects we're doing. We are then meeting with the Conservation District Board September 16th for their approval, and a submission for the CAP September 30th, which then October 1st, we will begin implementation of the plan for the county. So with that, I'll open the floor to any questions any council members have.
Well, thank you for your plan. I think it's well done. Obviously, you guys have very good expertise. Ms. Hoppe, if you had your hand up.
I just wanted to say thank you. It's clear you guys know what you're doing, and you have it all organized and put together exactly the way it should be. I wish every presentation that came to council was like this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Gives
appreciate
me
it.
a lot of confidence in our environmental future.
Now, the county, I mean, I'd like to acknowledge working with Luzerne County, the stakeholders. We've had a very beneficial, very mutual relationship with all stakeholders. A lot of good opinions on moving forward, working with the planning office, the district, and everyone. So I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for your comment.
Mr.
Thank you.
McGinley?
Thank you.
Mr.
Yes,
McGinley?
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Someone-
it's Walter Griffith. I just want to state that, you know, I've attended almost all the meetings by phone and virtually, and I will tell you that working with this group of individuals that work with this countywide action plan is just so refreshing to work with guys like Josh Longmore and Josh Glaze and Matt Jones. It's just amazing the expertise that they bring, as Ms. Houck just alluded to. And this is, you know, at first when I got on this team and Mr. McGinley appointed me to that, I thought that it was going to be a very boring and dry type of thing to get involved with. But I will tell you that these individuals make it very, very interesting. And the things that we can do to clean up our environment through this program is monumental. And I want to just publicly thank Josh Glaze and Josh Longmore and Matt Jones for their, we're very fortunate in Luzerne County to have a guy like Matt Jones on our team. His expertise in planning and zoning and Ed O'Neill are just fantastic people to work with. So I appreciate the opportunity to work with these individuals. They're very, very smart people in their field and very, very informative. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you guys and learn about our environment. I think it's very beneficial, and thanks for a great presentation. Thank you.
And just so you know, the presentation's on our webpage, so if somebody wants to review that, they may. Thank you, gentlemen.
If I could just reiterate, so as Josh said, we're finalizing this draft. So if council does have any more input, even individual, want to just reach out to us, provide us with input or questions, we can still incorporate that input. And then, as was determined last year, the Conservation District Board will be the final entity to give final approval. So we're presenting for your information and your input, which is welcome at any time up to the point of the September 18th board meeting, or whichever third Thursday of September at the Conservation District.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll take a short recess so we can visit the lavatories and other locations. And 8:15, we'll come back with the ordinance regarding Butler Township.
Am I still connected? Can you hear me?
Hey,
Yeah,
Sharon, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Sharon,
Well,
we
just
can hear
make-
you.
I just checked, see if I was still recording. Thanks.
unbelievably dishonest and corrupt.
For today.
Mr. Swets, are you on the line?
He is away and he won't be making this evening's meeting.
Okay. You want to start with number 3, Ms. Kirkland?
Yes, that's the Butler Township matter.
Yes. Right.
This, I'm sorry, getting feedback. This is a request to amend an ordinance that County Council passed regarding the transfer of roads in Butler Township. If Eddie O'Neill is on the line, he can give you particulars, but the highlighted portion is what we would like to amend. The roads are ready to be transferred, and Butler Township requested that they lease the Luzerne County District Number 5 maintenance garage, and also that the county would agree to deed or assign to the township any rights that we would have in the land located at 150 West Foothill Drives in Drums. Ed, are you on the line to give the particulars of this?
Yes, I am. Good evening, members of council. So as Ramilda had stated, we had an ordinance passed back in May of 2020, and that was adopting an intergovernmental agreement as it had previously read. And from that time, the intention was to move forward with the adoption of the roadways. Unfortunately, there was a delay with Foothills Drive, which was the first of the roads that we had reconstructed using full depth reclamation. Some of the delays had to do with the time of the year and being able for Butler Township to include that on their liquid fuels allocation request to PennDOT. Then there was the subsequent inspection and some small issues that they wanted remedied before they were willing to accept the deed of dedication for that road. So I have been actively pursuing this for the last several months to try and get this to come to fruition. And at a meeting we held 3 weeks ago, there were two items that came to the discussion and came to the table from Butler Township. As Ramilda had alluded earlier, one of those items was a garage that has recently been abandoned by the Luzerne County Transportation Authority that is located across the street from our District 5 garage at 150 West Foothills Drive. That garage was built at some time in the past, we believe prior to 2004, but at this point in time, we've been unable to find any documentation or agreements that were in place, allowing LCTA to use that land for the construction of that building. It was once the location where they housed some of their shared ride transportation buses for the Hazleton area, but they are no longer using it and have recently handed over keys to the county for that building. Sometime after it was built, and I believe the year was 2004, and this is in the agenda submittal, the county deeded over the land that garage was located on, along with some additional portions across the street where Butler Township has since built their recycling facility. So they have asked since it is technically on the property that Luzerne County had deeded over to them, they have asked to take possession of that building. It is a pole barn structure. I believe it's approximately 50 by 80 feet. I don't have the measurements, but it's not something we have any purpose for. So that was one of the stipulations that they asked that we give that to them to store equipment in order to eventually take over ownership of the roadways going forward. The second item was fairly minor. Originally in the intergovernmental agreement, they had asked to borrow or share our District 5 salt shed so that they would have a location to obtain materials for winter maintenance. At the meeting we held 3 weeks ago, we agreed that that would probably not be practical since it would involve sharing the use of a loader and also the property, and it would just lead to problems going forward. But what they did ask was that once all of the roadways in Butler Township were taken over, and that is in the foreseeable future, but probably many years down the road. They asked if they would be able to lease that garage in order to operate from, in addition to their other location, which is a couple miles away in Butler Township. We would not have any need for that garage once those roads are handed over. We have another garage not too far away that we would simply move our operations for the small number of roads that we would then have to take care of. So those are the two changes in the intergovernmental agreement. And those changes are the reason why we are seeking an amended ordinance from Luzerne County Council in order to proceed with the immediate dedication of West Foothills Drive to Butler Township.
Okay, questions for Ms. Corcomo or Mr. O'Neill? Council remembers.
Mr. McGinley, I have a quick procedural question for maybe Mr. DeLuca on this one. I'm not really sure. Are we following the right procedure to amend the ordinance? I assume, if I understand this correctly from Mr. O'Neill, we already enacted the ordinance on May 12th of 2020, and he wants to amend that ordinance. So do we need an ordinance to amend that ordinance, or should we just amend the ordinance that was drafted 2020-06? Is that the right procedure to just amend that ordinance, or do we have to draft a whole new ordinance?
Mr. Griffith, well, Attorney DeLuca can certainly respond to that. But whatever Attorney DeLuca says, as far as the Office of Law, what's the proper procedure, that's what we will have on the agenda in a future meeting. Whether it's an amendment or a different ordinance that rescinds the previous ordinance and provides for a new ordinance. But that will be followed according to what the Office of Law opinion is. But
does he understand what my question was, though? So did he know?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I got your question.
Thank you, Vito. I appreciate
all
that.
right. Questions regarding this information that's presented to us regarding the Butler Township intergovernmental agreement?
I do want to commend Ed O'Neill for really taking charge of this and getting these road transfers wrapped up sooner rather than later. He's really he's done a lot of work over especially the last few months on these road transfers, and it's greatly appreciated.
Okay. This was part of the council action. Remember when we paid for those roads, we brought up to the new standards, and that the municipalities that were serviced by these roads would take them over, and the county would drop them off of their list. So this is just a continuation of that action. Number 4, Ms. Corcomo.
Thank you. And just for a point of information, we did reopen East County Road in Sugarloaf Township this morning. Councilman Griffith and Councilman Snee were there at the reopening, and the residents and the representatives of Sugarloaf Township are greatly appreciative of that. The next item is something that I have brought up in the past, and we're approaching a time, given certain events that have happened, that it may be critical that, you know, I made a request that we reinstate Joyce, Carmody, and Moran as attorneys that can do work for the county. I believe that they have in the past done exceptional work for the county. They're very responsive, and they know county government. Some of the law firms that have replaced them are out of county, go as far as Harrisburg. And it's not that they're not reputable or good attorneys. It's just that we have to educate them about the county government, and they don't understand the nuances of Luzerne County. So I'm requesting it as the former chief county solicitor, and I have discussed this with Vito DeLuca. He is in agreement, and we'll leave it up to council.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Ms. Ross.
this would reverse council's decision from last October. And I'm just against this. This is unfortunately what happens when people play politics with the public trust. And if we remember, that this law firm really blew up the public trust. So I would ask we not move this forward to the voting session.
Anyone else? Okay, moving down to number 5, budget reports. Mr. Sweats is on vacation, I think. Is that correct?
He is
Ms.
away, and he could not make it this evening. If there are any questions, please email them to him, and we definitely will have responses to you as soon as he returns.
Okay. And number 6, which is the ADP contract.
This contract, the issue of extending the ADP contract is coming up. I believe it's self-explanatory of when the ADP contract will end. Here's the reality. Council, if council makes a decision not to renew or extend the ADP contract, we will have to go to Plan B, which would be to hire someone to do the work of and replace ADP. If council decides to do that, we will be prepared to do that, but we need to do it now. We can't wait. So this is an issue that we definitely want council's input on. Mr. Sweats did speak and had some lengthy conversations with ADP. This is what Brian and ADP came to as a possibility of extending the contract. But once again, we are going to defer to council on how they want to proceed with this contract.
Questions?
Council chooses not to do that, then we will go to Plan B and make alternative arrangements.
Okay. Questions?
Mr. Beginning.
Yes, Mr. Urban.
Just to confirm, is the annual contract right now at about $130,000 a year? What's the maintenance fee after?
I will get. I can get that maintenance fee for you. I will answer that question. I'll respond to it via email tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Number 7. Discussion regarding creating a fund for the district attorney's office with regard to the LEO agreement.
Again, I believe Mr. Sweats did send an email to council with his suggestion. And he suggested that for the LEO accounting, that a department be created under the district attorney's office in lieu of a new fund. Accounts already exist for the per diem salary and related taxes and benefits. We would then use expense reimbursement to track the airport reimbursement. And he would defer to the district attorney for his approval because it is his office. I can tell you, I have not had the opportunity to speak with the district attorney if he has a preference.
So there is availability in the district attorney's office to provide that service for the people who would be employed.
Yes.
Mr.
Griffith,
McGinley, if I
did you have a
could.
question?
Yeah, I requested this because I think it should be a fund. I certainly appreciate what Mr. Sweat said in his email about making it a department. The problem we have making it a department is that we have the ability for the district attorney to transfer money in or out of that fund under his own power. If it's a fund, it has to go through council. And that's why I thought it should be better to put it through a fund, much like we do with most other due to, due from accounts. And I understand we already have the account structure out there to do it as a department, but it would be, I think, entirely cleaner if we would make it a fund as opposed to a department. But at some point, maybe, you know, when Brian gets back from vacation, he can explain the differences, why he thinks it better to do as a department. But as a council member, I think it would be more controllable, not necessarily for Mr. Sanguidolce, who's going to be the district attorney, but I think for anybody who's in that position to have those as a fund account so they could actually see the money going in and going out, and there's no commingling or transferring funds from within by that division head or elected official. So that was my reason for the fund. So when Brian gets back, we can discuss it further. Thanks, Mr. McGinley.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, down to number 8, discussion regarding the ordinance amending Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority's Articles of Incorporation. We had a discussion, we had an introduction of a ordinance, and in our last meeting, we chose to postpone that ordinance at that particular time. I know we have guests here this evening from the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority, so we'll ask them to speak, please. I don't know who will be first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dominic Yanuzzi. I'm chairman of the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here this evening and clarify any questions that arose here with council on August the 14th, on August the 10th. There were some facts that were misrepresented regarding this issue. So here tonight with me is Christopher Bellman, the Executive Director of the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority. Mr. Bill Hardwick, Vice Chairman of the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority. We have the Honorable Keith Moss from the Borough of Duryea, and Jeff Bellman, the Council President of the Borough of Duryea. Prior to me speaking to go over some facts regarding this issue, I would like to turn over the microphone to Mr. Jeff Bauman to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Yanuzzi. Good evening, council members here in the room and online. This process of moving forward with amending the Articles of Incorporation for the Flood Protection Authority to include Duryea Borough would be, it's a necessary thing for the future of Duryea that impacts properties, lives, and the future of a residential town in this community. Even just the past few days, we had residents calling and saying, are we okay? Where are we going? What's going to happen with the flood, with Henri coming through? And we know that that wasn't going to impact our rivers, thankfully. It was more a real flood. But to know that we have an unaccredited levy in our system because of not being able to maintain it within our own realm of expertise leads us to worry down the future when that 100-year flood comes. To know where the flood maps have been laid, if we have no flood wall there, as recommended by FEMA, tells us that we will have a vacation of people leaving from our town eventually when they have to pay for flood insurance. To be going through the process and be granted the process to apply for accreditation with the help of the Flood Protection Authority and the expertise that they offer allows us that time to protect our citizens, our properties, and the livelihood of a growing municipality in this borough. So I'd ask council to listen to what they will talk to you about tonight, ask questions that you need clarified, but to move forward and allow us to join with them and move forward with this project. It is needed for the residents of not only Duryea, but Luzerne County.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. A brief amount of history of why we're here today about the Articles of Incorporation. Over a year ago, Duryea Borough was contacted by FEMA that their levy has been unaccredited. It's been an ongoing process. Duryea Borough has to bring that levy up to accreditation to be able to get flood insurance for the borough, as well as to protect the lives, as well as the properties of residents, as well as commercial businesses. Duryea Borough approached, as Mr. Bowman indicated, Duryea Borough approached the Flood Protection Authority for help about over a year ago. We went over with them different processes and steps that have to be followed for us to basically get here today. One of those was to have our mitigation board approve a project for them to study their levy, to determine what has to be done, and to provide design drawings and put them out for bid. That would be one of the first steps. Those funds would come from the mitigation board. It would not be coming from the residents that currently pay the fee. It is a total separate fund. After that, the mitigation board did vote unanimously, which includes all 5 members of the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority on that board. So it was a unanimous vote by the mitigation board to provide them with the funding to do their study as well as their design process. Once that was approved, it was provided to the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority to approve those funds for Duryea Borough to move forward. At that point, the Flood Protection Authority decided to start discussions with Duryea Borough to indicate what type of agreement would have to be in place for us to move forward with that. We discussed that with Duryea Borough, and Duryea Borough pretty much agreed to all of the different points that we provided, including Duryea Borough having to pay a fee to the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority for the operation and maintenance of that. Subsequent to those.
Before you move any further, mitigation funds are a separate source of funds.
Totally separate than what the fee is being paid by the.
Why does Duryea have to be in an agreement in order to be able to use those funds?
Duryea Borough, as part of the whole process, Duryea Borough has to own the system and then agree that has to be operated and maintained in accordance with the regulations of the.
Does that allow them to get the funds?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
They need to commit to the operation and maintenance of that levee system with all the proper protocols in place.
And does the mitigation board require that?
The mitigation board did not necessarily require that when they approved their funds, but the Flood Protection Authority did, because we are aware that that is one of the requirements for them to move forward with those funds.
So they have the mitigation funds regardless whether.
No, they're not. No, the Luzerne County, the Flood Protection Authority is holding those funds until all of the agreements are signed. Although the Duryea Borough has agreed in principle on a draft agreement that was discussed, we wanted to make sure that all of those items in that draft agreement were agreed upon in principle before we came here in front of county council.
Okay.
that is why we're here today. So we provided them with a draft agreement. They agreed to all the points in that agreement. And that includes that Duryea Borough would obtain the funding with the assistance of the Flood Protection Authority to bring it up to current standards. Once it's brought up to current standards, Duryea Borough would still own the levee system. They would be their own separate levee system. They're not connected to the Wyoming Valley levee system. They would be their own levee system with their own operation and maintenance costs. That Duryea Borough has indicated that they would like the Flood Protection Authority to oversee and complete for them, because while they do have employees for the borough, they are not experts in observing what has to be done on a day-to-day basis and the inspections that are needed. That's where the expertise of the Flood Protection Authority comes into play. Another item that came up that I just want to clarify where we're talking that it's going to be a separate system. They are flooded by the Lackawanna River. However, the Lackawanna River is affected by the Susquehanna River that was improved 20 years ago. The levee system was improved a little over 20 years ago by raising the levees in the Wyoming Valley. By that increase of backwater, by that increase of the flood levels, let me rephrase that. By that increase of the levels of the river inside the levee system creates a backwater on the Lackawanna River. So the Susquehanna River is higher where the Lackawanna River comes into the Susquehanna River, and the Lackawanna River cannot flow into the Susquehanna River, creating a backwater, thus flooding Duryea Borough more frequently, and that's why the mitigation funds are acceptable to be used for their project initially. There's going to be a lot more costs associated with Duryea Borough. Right now, the mitigation funds are there to do a study, engineering, as well as put it out for bid and get bids to improve that. Then there's going to be millions of dollars, or over $1 million, I'm going to just say, just for a ballpark, of improvements that have to be made to their system to get it accredited. Okay, so once that happened, we and Duryea Borough agreed in principle. We got those articles of incorporation. We determined that we had to update our articles of incorporation to expand the reach of the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority. Once that was developed and we consulted with the Luzerne County Solicitor's Office, our solicitor consulted with the Luzerne County Solicitor's Office, we developed a new articles of incorporation which have been presented in front of council, and that I was here a month or so ago to discuss with county council and ask any questions, as well as Mr. Hardwick was here that night as well. So those new articles of incorporation were also passed 5-0 by the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority to bring here the county council. So that is another fact that I want to present here. We voted on that, and it was voted 5-0 to get it here by all members of the Flood Protection Authority. Now, also, in the meantime, like I said, Duryea passed at a council meeting that they approved the draft agreement. So what we would do upon, as council further considers those articles of incorporation, if they are passed, we will then be given the authority by county council to be able to expand and help Duryea Borough and enter into an agreement with them. So I think that's somewhat of all the background. So is there any questions that you may have for me regarding what I just said?
Yeah. So I was actually, with the last presentation that was here, that was specific with the amendment being, dealing with Duryea, I was actually the one who said, well, it's the Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority. I mean, maybe you should make it more general, so you don't have to keep amending the Articles of Incorporation if something else in the county needs your assistance, okay? And the whole, as I'm sure you're aware, the whole thing kind of came to a standstill when one of your board members came here and talked about how those of us, and I'm one of them, who pay the levy fee, will then essentially be funding the project for Duryea. So could you speak to that? Direct, like, clearly and directly.
Clearly and directly. The project for Duryea is 100% not funded by the current ratepayers of the levy fee. Their projects will be funded initially by the mitigation program, which is a total separate fund established by, I will let Mr. Bellman discuss exactly how all those funds are allocated, because he works with that on a day-to-day basis. That is a total separate fund, and I believe it's federal and state funds, Chris, correct?
Yeah, sure, yes.
Right, okay. It's federal and state funds that will fund approved projects that are within the realm of mitigation. And the mitigation is areas that were affected by the Wyoming Valley levee system that when that system was improved 20 plus years ago. So also, they will be paying, once that is developed, then there will be additional funds that would have to be acquired, separate to be able to do the improvements. And the Flood Protection Authority and the Mitigation Board, they do this year after year. There's dozens of projects that are done through the mitigation program that are not funded by the current ratepayers of the fee to operate and maintain the Wyoming Valley levee system.
Okay, and that's very clear and very direct, and that's exactly what I wanted to hear. So just to move away from Duryea for a second, then, could you explain exactly what the levy fee does pay for then?
Okay, the current levy fee pays for. It pays for the building that the Flood Protection Authority is in. It pays for the building that the equipment is in. It pays for the employees. It pays for operation and maintenance of equipment.
Your operating costs, in other
Correct,
words.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
You are moving to a new building, I see.
Yes, we did find a building right next to the garage that actually houses our equipment, and it is we believe it's a very good building, and we want to move forward with that.
Okay. And the reason I asked you to explain that is because I want it to be clear what the difference is between where those funds are used and what's going to fund Duryea. And as you know, probably since the inception of Home Rule, one of the hot topics at our meetings every year is the levy fee. And, that's in the purview of the Flood Protection Authority. And I think it's very important that the correct information about the use of that levy fee is out there, and especially in relation to this project. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Serving.
So you spoke about the $1 million. Where is that exactly coming from?
That would be coming from another pot of money, not from the levy fee. It could come from a grant. It could potentially come from mitigation funds. Chris, right?
There's nothing guaranteed though, right?
No, there isn't.
So
No.
I'm not the straight skinny on this.
Correct, but it's not coming from the levy fee. Okay, however.
I get that, but I asked you a direct question. Where is it coming from? I mean, you're giving a direct number, so I want to know.
No, I said it's gonna be over $1 million. I don't know what that number could be. It could be.
But you don't know where it's gonna come
It
from.
could be 3 million. I don't know the exact number right now, because that's what that first phase of funding is being put together for. There's gonna be an engineering study done. They're gonna determine what has to be done. There will be an engineer's estimate put together, and then that project will be put out for bid to be constructed. And then once that number is known, then that's when they have to apply for more funding for other locations.
So where's the money for the engineering study coming from?
The mitigation program.
So with the mitigation program, where's all that money coming from? Is that currently coming from federal and state monies?
Correct.
Do you have the amounts?
I'm going to turn over the microphone to Christopher Bellman right now.
I only want to state that because in your minutes here, it says, Mr. Hardwick questioned if we have any indication that Duryea reached out to the state and federal level to see if they have support for the project. And you stated that in the future, once the agreements are signed, that means, I translate that you haven't reached out to the state or the Fed yet on the money. So, you know, and the other thing is that you said you have a draft agreement. Can we see that copy of that draft agreement?
Yes, you
That,
can
that,
see.
okay, that was approved by council.
Yes, you can see.
Okay, I'd like a copy of that too. You know, I mean, we're talking $1 million, and then I'm also looking at the minutes here, where there was motion was made to request permission from the proper officials to approve the list of LCFPA project to be submitted to Luzerne County Administration for inclusion in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. So, you know, how much money, this goes back to what I said weeks ago, where county administration, I think, was promising $8 million of that money going over to the Flood Protection Authority. And is this included in that project? Or, you know, what are the plans for that $8 million, or the so-called $8 million?
It is not. I just want to let you know, that money is not being.
I mean, currently, I mean, we haven't allocated anything as a county, so nobody's promised anything.
100% correct, yes.
Okay. But you have a list of a wish list that you want to submit over to Luzerne County ready for that money.
We were asked to, we provided that, and that is basically on our long-term list of items that have to be done or currently in the process of having to be done. So a lot of those items on that list could be done immediately instead of being done over a period of 5 or 10 years, thus making the system better maintained, operated, as well as safer than what it is today.
So the county already asked you for a wish list?
Yes, we were asked for,
By whom?
we were asked for a list, yes.
By whom?
I'm gonna turn that over to Christopher Bellman. He was the one that handled that.
Okay. I mean, this, you know, obviously I asked these questions a couple weeks ago, and Ramila, you know, she did state that nothing was really promised or stated to anybody, but it sort of contradictory.
Nothing was ever promised to us. We were just
Right, but-
asked to provide a list.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of the circumvention of council.
And that remains today. There are no promises made.
Okay. But did your staff actually go out and reach out to different entities already and asking for wish lists from different entities? I mean, like everybody wants a piece of the pie already from the county.
No, we did not formally ask for a wish list from any entities. We have had discussions with various entities to start some foundational work, but we did not ask for, we didn't ask specifically for a wish list. We did in our conversations ask for potential programs or projects that might be involved. But there is no request for any wish list and no promises were made.
Programs and projects, this still translates into like a wish list. I mean, I don't care how you want to slice the verbiage, but.
Well, we need to know, we need to compare it to whether it meets the requirements, not only in the temporary rule, but in anticipation of a final rule. We have to make sure that it's need-based, and we have to make sure that we can deliver the reporting requirements, because we will be audited. This is the U.S. Treasury that's overseeing this project. We want to be very tedious about how we're going to go about this. But I will unequivocally say no promises were made to any entity that we spoke to or that we received information from.
Okay, I mean, I obviously, you know, you were deferring to, you know, the final rule later on in I guess, in upcoming months, you know, I know Councilmember Haas, you know, had brought up, you know, an allocation and everybody shoot him down, or at least preliminary, and like have objections about the itinerary or the final rule coming out. But now, you know, when you're looking at some of these other entities, I mean, I've already seen paperwork from you know, various sources now. I'm looking at the minutes here. They're looking for money from us, the flood protection, and I think there was another entity in a previous meeting where I had the paperwork in another agenda packet from another. I think even like
Councilman Urban, people are always looking for money from us. That goes without saying. But I will tell you this. The administration is actually considering incorporating some of Councilman Haas's requests. That will all be reviewed. And there are certain projects and programs that have been clearly accepted by the U.S. Treasury. But I want to say this again, and I want everybody to heed this. The fact that a project might be accepted by the U.S. Treasury is not the beginning and the end of the analysis. We need to be absolutely matter-of-factly consistent and have enough evidence to support why a project is needed in Luzerne County. Number one. And number two, we have to make sure we can deliver the reporting requirements, and they are going to be daunting. So the first part, that a project might be acceptable, is an initial and perhaps maybe the easiest question to answer. The second two will require a lot more thought. Whether it comes from the Flood Protection Authority, whether it comes from a nonprofit, whether it comes from a small business, those last two issues, the evidence to support why we need that project and the reporting requirements will determine the administration's recommendations to council.
Did the municipality get any American Rescue money?
The municipality was offered ARPA money. That's a drop of bucket here. We got 500,000. But I want to kind of like steer the conversation back towards the agenda item that we're discussing. Just because your first question was, did we approach funding agencies? And then it got to the ARPA funds. So I kind of see how they're linked. One, we know we have ARPA funds, so we're taking the route that your interim manager is taking of wait until they really tell us how to spend it, because I'm not getting in trouble for spending the money. So take that warning and sit on the money for as long as you have to. Next, and I support that. Next, we've talked to our state representative, Mike Carroll, about it. He said there's money available. Working with the expertise of the gentleman that looks better than all of us in the room today, it has told us of where the money comes from, because he's gotten that money before. So that's why we're leaning that way. That's why I'm here. Not to worry about the administrative issues that kind of are on the docket on this agenda item too. I'd rather the discussion go towards what Ms. Houck is talking about. Your concerns are valid, but I think that's a work session about ARPA funds, not why Luzerne County Flood Protection.
Well, it's not the only thing. I'm reading the verbiage out of their own minutes.
Right, and I understand that. I'm not a part of that organization in that party, so you can ask those questions, but don't go on the rabbit hole.
Right. Well,
I'd love to talk about the issue about getting my flood wall up to protection, not who's promising things out.
Well, I mean, but it does state on the record here that you haven't reached out to the state or federal for support of the project.
From those minutes, but at the same time, it's a conversation that's ongoing. They can't make promises either, just like you can't make promises here. So I don't want to mince words either.
Well, Mr. McGinley, if I could just say, I mean, to be fair, the item on the agenda is the amendment of the Flood Protection Authority. It's not the,
I know that. That's what I want to really get to the heart.
So it does speak to that, but I understand your concern. And that
I don't
is
want to
what-
get it tied up with something that's not where we're going.
But that is what got us here. So, I get it.
Right. The project in line now is the mitigation funds to help design it and put it out for bid. The other funds that are discussed in those meeting minutes was referring to the future funding to do the actual construction, which is beyond the design. Okay, so but until you know what has to be done and the amount, no funding agency is going to fund or even look at an application until you have the study done. So that's what that means there. That's what those minutes meant regarding that additional funding from federal and state agencies. But I'm going to turn the microphone over to Christopher Bellman to discuss a little bit about the mitigation fund, just to give you a little bit of background so you understand the mitigation funds a little bit more, because he is the more of an expert on them. Christopher.
Good evening. The Wayne Valley Levee Racing Project, it occurred from essentially the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. Now, the physical construction has been long complete, but there's still a mitigation component that which we're trying to complete. And because of the levee raising project, there was adverse effects from the levee raising, which affected the communities outside of the 60-mile flood protection system. So we have projects in Luzerne County and the 4 downstream counties of Snyder, Columbia, Montour, and Northumberland that we're trying to complete. In fact, we're just about complete with the 4 downstream counties, which will just leave Luzerne County to complete our mitigation effort. Currently, we have about $2.3 million in our mitigation fund. And just to go back to what Dominic was talking about, what the Mitigation Advisory Board and the Flood Protection Authority Board approved was to issue a request for proposals for professional not architect, but engineering surveying services to perform the design and permitting for the design for the Duryea levee rehabilitation. Because our end goal here is to get the Duryea system accredited by FEMA. And this is the first step in that effort. So we did issue the RFP, went through the evaluation process, and we did select a firm, Reed Peterson out of Bozic, and their opinion of cost to perform this work is approximately $430,000 off the top of my head. So we have that money in our mitigation program to fund that effort. And what our goal is here is to do the design, to do the permitting, to come up with the construction deliverables. So we will have a shovel-ready project that we can go after grants for. The design and permitting effort will take about 16 months. Construction will take approximately 12 months, depending on how quickly we get grant. But the entire process before the Duryea system can be accredited is going to be approximately 3 years. That's how long it's going to take. It's not going to be next week. It's not going to be next year. It's going to be approximately 3 years.
Mr. Bellman, you said you've already issued an RFP?
Yes, we did, but they haven't started yet.
Now, who issued the RFP?
The Flood Protection Authority did on behalf of Duryea Borough.
Okay. The mitigation board is made up of whom?
The mitigation board is composed of the 5 members of the Flood Protection Authority board, 1 member each from Columbia County, Snyder, Northumberland, and Montour, and 2 non-voting members, one from DEP and the other is from the Susquehanna River Basin Commission.
Okay. And they all participated in that process of the mitigation selection of the project, et cetera? Okay, after we get through that, I have a question about the project itself, but it doesn't have to do with mitigation.
Mr. McGinley, if I could.
Go ahead.
Hi, Chris. It's Walter Griffith. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. I don't know if they go to you or to Dominic, but are the residents of Duryea required to purchase flood insurance like the residents are required in the Wyoming Valley area? Could you answer that one?
Yeah, Walter, I think I can answer that. If you have a third that mortgage, then you are probably required by your carrier to have flood insurance.
Even in Duryea, correct, Chris?
Oh, yes. I mean, of course, if your mortgage is paid off, you don't have, you can make the election to not have flood insurance.
Okay.
But that's the one
and my other question is how much how much is it going to cost the borough of Duryea to maintain the levees once you use your mitigation funding and the extra funding to fix the levee and get all that other stuff? How much is it going to cost to maintain the levee for Duryea Borough, and how are they going to raise that money?
Walter, to answer that question, we really don't have the answer yet. We have to go through see what the design looks like. And then construction, then we can make a determination based upon our own experience, what we feel the annual cost would be for Duryea Borough to reimburse the flood protection. But I don't have to figure it out.
Currently right now, I think the way the flood protection authority does it now is they charge the people in the area for the maintenance of the levee. And so my question for Duryea Borough is, I think it's something that the people of the borough need to understand, is once the flood protection straightens out the levee system and gets the maintenance together, they're either going to have to levy a fee on those folks or increase their taxes to pay for that. And then just so they know how far reaching is that, does it just cover Duryea? Does it go to Old Forge? How far does this levee protection have to go?
If I may, Mr. Griffith, thanks for that question, because that's actually one of the questions that come up from the residents when they talk about why are we doing this? How can we avoid doing an intergovernmental agreement? Because that's a scary term for some organizations, given the Luzerne County Sewer Authority and the stormwater mitigation fee. So it's a very quick question that people ask. My response is, we've accepted responsibility as council by passing this agreement, that we accept the financial responsibility. If that's going to be a yearly fee of, if I say $200,000, that's a lot of money, but at the same time, it's the hourly wage to cut the grass, which I currently use people from my street department to do. I pay somebody to inspect my dike sluice valves on a yearly basis to make sure that you can actually water through. The people that I pay to manage the Japanese knotweed, we already have budget infrastructure for dike maintenance, but it's not done well because we aren't experts at it, and it's not done and managed by people that can do it. So my opinion is we take money that's already budgeted, have allocated and move it back over here, and then also look at our tax structure, look at our fee structure, look at where we have, we're not gonna say, oh, people that are living below Main Street who are in the floodplain, that won't be the approach that I'm willing to take as the leader of the town. I will say it is for the whole town. The whole town bears the burden and it has a tax base, not just a section of town that's gonna be benefited, because I live on high ground, and I know that I don't want people having flooded homes, so that way we don't lose property tax for the whole town. So I'd be willing to raise my taxes, at least as a leader of the town. And I know there's great sentiment like that in the whole town. So that's our plan, and that's why we're working closely now to make that happen. Does that answer your question, Mr. Griffith? You're welcome.
Kind of interesting you said that. Like, you're willing the whole town. Because there's a strong sentiment in Luzerne County that the whole county should be supporting the levee system.
I will say that I agree with that in this room.
Okay. Not everybody agrees, but certainly I have a lot of discussion about it.
I benefit from somebody up the hill as much as somebody down the hill.
Okay.
Community.
Yeah, and my last question, Mr. McGinley, if I could, is the mission statement for the flood. The mission statement for the Flood Protection Authority is probably going to have to be altered as well, because it says clearly in the mission statement that their mission is to protect the residents along the Susquehanna, and this obviously is not part of that mission statement. So I think we need to maintain those levees. I think we need to do what we can to help the borough of Duryea, but we just need to make sure that we have the proper funding in place. So I appreciate the opportunity to ask the question. Thank you.
Well,
Mr.
Go ahead.
I'm Mayor Mark from Duryea, and I'd just like to thank Dominic and Chris Ballman, Jeff Ballman, myself. We went to the Luzerne County Flood Authority for this help. Myself and Jeff sat down with them. We went over everything. We just had a dike project at Duryea that I believe you're aware of, Mr. McGinn. We didn't have a piece of dike in there. It took us, I'm mayor 20 years, it took us a good 15 years to get this new piece of dike put in.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mr. Urban talks about funding. We went through funding with DEP and the federal government, and we got that funding. That's the same way that we plan on funding this now, that we plan on the upgrade, because we don't want to see our residents have to pay $150,000 for flood insurance, because our dike system is unaccredited. We work very hard in Duryea to keep our dike system up. We don't have the people to do it. We're only a small town of under 5,000 people. That's why we went to the professionals, and they're very helpful in Luzerne County flood protection. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm here to take questions.
I do have one more. How many houses are impacted or in the floodplain, statistically speaking, in Duryea?
We had 136 homes flooded in 2011.
Okay.
And with the new flood maps, it's probably over 200.
That's the 300 you're at, right?
The new FEMA flood insurance maps.
Yeah.
They have recommended a natural plain analysis for our whole town. And if you know anything about Duryea, it's from the railroad tracks basically on down to the river that run along this is the White's Market.
We have a school that they just called me up yesterday and said to me, Mayor, are we gonna have a problem? Because we have a school in Duryea and it's right by the river.
Well,
I can't blame them.
Yeah, I mean, I work in the junction, but you know, I know it does flood down in that
Right.
trestle there.
Mr. Griffith said about the Susquehanna River not impacting Duryea. That's what impacts the Lackawanna River. I've been mayor for 20 years, I've been on council for 8 years, it's 28 years, okay? What happens is when the Susquehanna comes up, it backs the Lackawanna up. In 2011, I never seen a river flow north, because that's what happened with the Susquehanna River. Like Dominic was saying, and Chris was saying about raising the dike systems. If West Pittston ever raises the dikes, you must buy Duryea out, because Duryea will be completely flooded. The whole time.
And it's interesting you said that. Are there any plans of buying out properties too in some of the worst areas in Duryea and like they did in Jenkins Township, you know, right by the 8th Street Bridge? And then the other thing is what's the Flood Protection Authority doing to mitigate some of the issues with maybe possibly dredging the river because of all the sediment and the islands that are there? You know, I mean, I know over in sort of Jenkins there that there's one island there. And a while back, I used to drive by on River Street and see the house sitting in the middle of the island. You know, so I mean, it's not just, you know, let's keep building a bigger wall.
I'll give you a good instance.
Let's clean it out too, clean the channels out so it doesn't back up.
DEP came to us in Duryea.
Right.
To take islands out on the river.
Right.
So we had airport sand and gravel at the time. We had to get permission from DEP and everything. Went in and took the one island out. That island has come back with a vengeance 10 times over.
Right.
So dredging it did not do any good.
Well, there's multiple islands though from all along the river going from you know, West Pittston all the way down to Wilkes-Barre and Hanover Township. I mean, there's trees obviously in the middle of the river. So, you know, I mean, we obviously, and like I said, you can keep building the bigger wall, but eventually the sediment's going to keep backing up anyway. So how are you going to go with wall?
Exactly right.
In the future.
Exactly right. All the way from.
It has to be more of a comprehensive plan than just put up another wall, because you put up another wall somewhere and then it's going to back up somewhere else and impact another community. So it's just a continuous chain reaction if you don't attack it from a multi-pronged approach.
Correct. And to talk about who's involved, 6 members of council sat on a FEMA flood mitigation plan called in 2019, where they introduced our new flood maps. And to hear somebody talk passionately about hydrology maps from FEMA is very awkward. And then I know because it's something that I never thought would be interesting. But they told us and explained to us why it happens. They showed us the studies about, yeah, you want to do dredging, but that's not where you're going to make your biggest impact, because you want to smooth things out so things can flow faster and get out of the way. But that's not going to make your biggest impact. And they talk about freeboard and making sure if it's land-based or wall-based, you know, what has the different impacts. And that's the organization that at least me as leadership of council has taken to talk to people in West Pittston about what are you going to do and why are you going to do it, and the cost to them, because theirs is going to come solely out of their pockets the same. You know, just like we're looking to fund their dual maintenance project. So this whole project of being a part of the community is this conversation all the time of how can we mitigate impact, which is what Chris is really talking really hard about, and then how do we also be sure that what is there is protected. And I say about, you talk about buying on homes, they're right along the levee, so and they're homestead homes, people have been there forever, you know, so they're really not going anywhere, you know, like in the sense to say like, sure, I'll sell. Because they're people that have been there for quite a long time, and we don't have other places to put them in the town. You know, and I miss that tax base, because then I wouldn't be able to pay our levy fee, you know, as I say, the town's levy fee is the way we look at it. Because I lose more tax base. I have more grass to cut. I have more grass to cut.
I mean, I do look at it, like I said, as a multi-pronged approach too, because, you know, with rush of water, you knock down a few trees in the middle of an island and it hits the 8th Street Bridge or something like that. And it, you know, just like a beaver dam, it's just gonna back up.
Yeah, yeah, I remember reviewing the proposals that, you know, looked at, it's like, that's what they wanna look at, they wanna look at that whole scope, you know, and that's why I have confidence that if you brought that to 6 members of council and 7 members of council with a revolving door of every 2 years, you're not gonna get consensus and leadership to make that happen. And that would be a worry for 10 years down the road in the borough, because council changes so frequently. So to have an authority handling it allows us that certainty that we're talking about, that matters when it comes to life or death or property damage or things like that. So I appreciate the question, the real like robustness of the imperil.
And the flip side is I don't like expansion of the government either, you know.
Right.
And giving the authority more authority to do whatever it needs to do because of the limited scope that the authority had at the inception, was just for the Boundary Valley levy system. You know, and how far are we gonna have their authority reach throughout the entire county of Luzerne? You know, so are they?
Do you have, I asked, like, can I come to council and ask you guys to help with the flood mitigation area? Is there somebody in the office in the courthouse that can? I don't know that I could. So I don't have the confidence. So that's just me being practical, that I will go where it solves the problem for my residents. Which I know all you do. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, other people? I have a question about your current flood protection. Mayor,
sure,
Council President. At one time, you had that gap.
Yeah.
That's filled in.
What was that, 75 feet or?
No, that was over 500 feet. It was from the Holy Rosary Cemetery to Stevenson Street.
Yeah. Yep. So you have done what with that?
We worked with DEP and our federal government, and they put pilings in from the Holy Rosary Cemetery all the way up to Stevenson Street. And it's sheet pilings, and it's 1.5 to 2 feet higher than our original dike. What we're working on right now, and Dominic knows that, we're going to DEP and that, see if we get another grant to raise the rest of our earth levy up to the height of that sheet piling that we had put in.
So you said that the dike protection system is not accredited.
It's currently not accredited based on the new flood maps, right?
Right, because the
So
other
why
parts,
is it not accredited?
the other parts of our dike are the parts that are not accredited, because there is the pipes that come through the levee that call the flap gates. There's concrete pipes in there that's pulled apart and the water is getting in there. There's steel pipes that's rusted away. Our abutment walls where our flap gates are deteriorating with the concrete. And we just didn't have the money to take care of it or do it. We did a video. We have to do a video survey of them for DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. And that's the reason why we're not accredited.
When you did your video, did you have a cost estimate for some of those types
$1
of?
million replaced 18 of them.
How much?
$8 million. And like, that's the thing, is that is a whole, like, right there, we have become a member of the SWIFT program from the state, that allows us to get back into funding sources with the Army Corps and the state DEP. So that's been something we worked on over the last year with our borough manager and submitting reports to show we're on a mission and that we need help, which is kind of a great process. And then we move through that process to say, okay, you could be allocated $400,000 this year, and then the second year you could be allocated more, because there's rehabilitation money that, you know, we're gonna start angling at to say, but at the same time, if the design project says you need to scrap this whole process and change all of that, we don't want to spend money if it's not going to solve the problem long term. The freeboard is what they talk about at the top of the levee. When I looked at the results and looked at the cute maps, because that's what I understood from the FEMA project, is there were colors, red, green, and yellow. green is fine, yellow, and then red is you're having water come over based on the 100-year flood. Sections that were not as flooded during the 2011 flood are now red. And so that's if the water goes that way, it comes that way. It's all predictability, it's all hydrology, whatever they do. I don't understand it, but I listen to that. So that's the interesting part, is that we spent all this time since, previous floods, not the 11th flood, but the floods before that, focusing on this Holy Rosary Cemetery part, because it was the lowest. Now we have a problem with the hill, so it's like kind of like when you put your hand on one leaf and you're like, now it'll be over here. I only have two hands. What do I do next? That's where we're at. And I give my street department all the credit in the world that they're out there weed whacking, cutting things down, but they can't go too close to the river with the gas blower because they'll be fined. That's the same thing, that we have protections, federal government telling us what to do and not to do, even though we're told to do things in the night. We have islands that we can't go out and do because we can take a backhoe out there and get rid of it, but no, don't do it that way. That's the way to do it. So there's a lot of things that are thrown at us at all times to try to make this work for now, but we know it's not a long-term solution.
What if none of these grants come to fruition for you?
I'm sorry, that?
What if none of these grants come to a finalization for you?
I think we just need to keep chasing it down. I think that that's the reality of what we're doing, is that if we don't have a plan in place to say, we kind of want to fix our levy, but we don't know what has to be done, we're never getting it. I think about business development. If somebody doesn't come to you with a business plan, you're not going to fund the business unless you really like the person. I don't think anybody really likes Duryea to be like, yeah, here's the check. So this is my security blanket to say we actually have a funding project, and the government shouldn't say no, because they need to be reelected too, in a sense, and they need to make things happen for the community and know the value that has. So that's the way I look at it. That's the conversation I've had with Ms. Mike Carroll. That's the conversation I've had with other municipality leaders of how they get their money, and how they actually get a shovel-ready project instead of a dream sitting in a room. It's the idea that you put the money behind it first. Granted, we're grateful that mitigation fund put that money for us, as opposed to us having to come up with the RFP funding project, because that would be half of a quarter of my budget, that I wouldn't be able to do it. So that's the thing, is that this process hinges on this RFP, and this RFP may possibly be of mitigation funds, which is the federally government backed program. So if we already are federally government light, but mitigation project board, we're liable for future funding.
Just like I went to several meetings over at EMA with Lucy and that with the mitigation. We're granted money through the mitigation to help us with funds. And like you said, what are we gonna do if we don't get money? We're gonna go to them and we're gonna say, we need these funds. If we don't get these funds, we're gonna keep on going and get them eventually. You gotta work with your congressmen, you gotta work with your representatives, you gotta work with your state senators, you gotta work with your local county government, and that's what we plan on doing. And I'm telling you, these people here from the Luzerne County Flood Authority are above and beyond. They're a great help and great asset to everybody in Luzerne County, not just Duryea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else's questions?
Mr. McGinley, I just wanted to add one thing. I like to listen more than talk, but I would say in listening here tonight, it really got simpler for me. These people came to us and said, we need help. You guys know what to do. We need your help. We're coming to you and saying, we need your help so we can help them. And yes, maybe it's today, Duryea, and maybe tomorrow it may be West Pittston. It may expand, or it might just be Duryea. But at least we're going to give them the best we can give them and do what we can do to help them out. And that's what we're trying to do.
Any other questions?
Add one more thing. I think the
Go ahead.
conversation is great, but I think we also need to, I think we need to take maybe a couple representatives from council, a couple representatives from Duryea flood protection, also the state representatives, and put everybody in the same room. So we're all speaking the same language, because you did bring up the point yourself that, we built up the wall in the lowest point, and then we had another issue somewhere else. And a lot of it probably stems from state regulation that's beyond our control as a county, and probably beyond control as a flood protection authority. DEP, EPA probably all has a lot of regulations. You can't do a lot of stuff in the middle of the river because maybe you're hurting the fish or the wildlife or something to that nature. But the reality is that you still have to clean it up to get the water flowing. Else somewhere else is going to back up like that, with the clogged toilet. So at the end of the day, we need to come up with a long-term solution and not just keep throwing money at something building up one piece of the wall somewhere and another piece somewhere else, and it backing up. That's, money's not unlimited, but we want to make the best use of it.
Just remember one thing, Duryea is the last town in Luzerne County.
Right.
Okay, so we get it from Lackawanna County.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and I've been down here when the commissioners were here, and they didn't even know in 2011 that we had 139 homes and no help in Luzerne County whatsoever. Now I am coming to council and Luzerne County's Flood Authority to give us some help, right, to help us out.
But I think somebody like State Rep Carroll also.
And he's a great help.
And John, we all need to sit in the same room though.
And I think that that's the next conversation, is that if there's ways that council could put an edge in the door of like prying over the door to get funding sources, because they've got the bigger body, the bigger, what does Duryea do for us, do for the county, you can target that chip. And I'm gonna do the same thing with John, I'm gonna do the same thing with Mike, and then going to Mike Lamarno in Old Forge, and going to Pittston, and going to different mayors and organizations to say, give us an edge, support us going for this type of grant in our community, because keeping people here keeps our communities robust. Like think about that as to say, like, if there's money that can go here that allows us to keep property taxes, that helps you guys. We were worried about the pilot earlier, which I think was a great conversation here too, that, I think we were more about residents losing property taxes long term than a pilot, so that's the same breath, that the same concern in that comes to this too. And I think you all are coming from the same good respective position. So I think bringing people to the table is a great way to do it. That we're going to be asking for money, is where's the money and who can we have to ask help for?
Anyone else?
What is the next step, sir?
What's the next step? Well, I still think there's some probably issues that have to be discussed, but certainly shortly, we'll have to be back on the agenda as far as the your articles of incorporation. My personal opinion, I'd like to see the articles written a little bit differently. And I think about the way I would propose that. We certainly should be doing, in my eyes, as much as we can to help any of our boroughs or townships, whatever, across the county. I don't want to commingle funds that are currently coming from the ratepayers in Wyoming Valley. As you all know, the authority was set up to deal with the ratepayers and the communities that surrounded the Susquehanna River. So it's going a little different direction than you had the situation Duryea has at this point.
Actually, Duryea is on the Susquehanna River.
Part of it.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, part of it. But we had the flooding was on the Lackawanna, right?
Yeah, but the flooding comes from the Susquehanna.
Well, I understand the
Constant section.
a little bit of the scientific behind it. And in 2011, I was up there and I saw that. I saw the devastation in your town. And I was very surprised that when I saw that gap in the dike system, that just floored me at that point.
Well, before we move off this topic, then could I just ask you how you would like to amend it? Because
Well,
we
I'll
took
have
this
that
and we
together and
amended,
I'll send that out.
we had a proposal, we amended this once already, and that's what came here. I mean,
Yeah, but I will, when I put it together, I'll send that out. I haven't thought through it yet.
Okay.
Okay, so, excuse me, Chairman McGinley, would that be potentially on the next voting session
I
for?
will alert you when it will be on the agenda.
Okay, just want to make it clear that a lot of steps have been put together. We would say not really the cart before the horse, but a lot of the things that go in the cart are already ready to go.
I think you filled the card up.
The cart's full, correct. And without the final passage of a new articles of incorporation, the mitigation funds will not be released to Duryea, and Duryea cannot get moving forward with their project.
Yeah.
So that's
Understandable.
We just wanted to
Well,
make that clear.
So the ordinance was already introduced. The next vote on it will be the passage of it. It will be final. I mean, it depends on what Mr. McGinley sent when, what he wants to see in those articles and how council approves it. But that'll be the next vote.
Yep, you're correct. It's been introduced. We had a public hearing.
Right.
depending on what would be the amendment, we may have a public hearing that night when we have the final vote. You know, there won't be any other steps involved.
And us as an authority would not be undertaking or even pursuing a project like this with Duryea unless we had the proper funding in place or the means to maintain that system. And that is what the commitment of Duryea Borough has made to us. And that's part of the Articles of Incorporation. It's, I don't remember the exact words that are in that council.
Financially feasible?
Financially feasible, correct. So it would not be financially feasible if Duryea Borough did not come to the table to commit to the operation and maintenance costs of their system.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good discussion. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your input.
If you could put it on your next voting session for Duryea, we greatly appreciate it.
As soon as I put my thoughts together, Mayor, I'll get that out to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Okay, we're at council committees. Mr. Bo?
Yes, the committee met last week and we're going to meet again in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Mr. Perry?
We don't have a meeting scheduled, but I plan on having one shortly within the next month. We are talking about possibly revising the application for agencies. Linda reached out and she sent me some information that how she would like changed, and I'm going to reach out to the rest of the council and see how they would have any input on it, and we'll put it together at our meeting, and we'll come to council with some changes or some revamping of the application.
Okay. Budget, Finance, and Audit, myself, as everybody's place tonight was a draft proposal for the audit season starting October the 12th. It was also sent via email out. So this is very similar to what we've done past many years, but I wanted to get that out. So everybody have a chance to review that, and if it's meets everybody's expectations, we'll be looking to finalize that. Legislative, Mr. Haas?
Yeah, legislative, Mr. Chair, at the CCAP meeting, I shared our displeasure with the potential of tolling roads on our 2 interstate bridges that we have, and they said they would take that up. And Mr. Griffith was also in attendance. Secondly, Ms. Crocomo actually saw on the ground recently what's going on in Whitehaven, and appreciate you, Ramilda, about going to lobby for us to put a stop to the potential tolling on 81. I don't know if Ramilda, you have anything to share with the council at large about that.
I do. Monday morning, I had a weeks ago, I scheduled with Matt Jones and 2 members of his staff to tour some of the bridges. Monday morning, we were only able to tour the West Nanticoke Bridge, and then we went to the 2 possible toll roads in Nescopeck and Whitehaven. And it was eye-opening. Everybody should take that tour with them. They are extraordinarily knowledgeable. We are the only county that has 2 toll roads, and both of them are problematic, particularly to the residents of the southern part of the county and businesses in the southern part of the county. But the bridge at Whitehaven really offends my sense of justice. It's a toll that will be placed, and we will not get a dime. And more importantly, it will change the face of Whitehaven, which is a community that is growing its rails and the trails that they have, the nature walks, and it really is a very quaint community nestled at the foothills of the Poconos, and they're thriving on that, and they're working on that. When traffic gets rerouted through Whitehaven, particularly with trucks, it will be a disaster. It will be a significant safety concern. So I am determined for the time that I'm sitting in this chair that I will do anything in my power. I will advocate zealously with PennDOT and anybody in the state who will listen, that toll road should not exist at all. There are also issues with the Nescopeck toll as well, but the Whitehaven toll is particularly offensive. And anybody on council who wishes to join me in this venture, please, you're all welcome. I reached out, I spoke this morning to the Hazleton Chamber, and I'm going to be working with business leaders as well to storm Harrisburg and do whatever we can to stop this from happening.
Thanks, Romilda. And again, a credit to the whole council at large. It unanimously supported a resolution against the tolling of either of those bridges. And again, doing the right thing. I haven't talked to a single person in Luzerne County that thinks that's a good idea. So again, we want government to work for people, not against them. So thanks for that, Romilda. And that's the legislative report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Real estate, Mr. McDermott.
We're gonna have a meeting on Thursday, September 16th at 6 o'clock p.m.
Thank you. Strategic initiatives, Ms. Howe.
Nothing on strategic initiatives. County code review, we have not met. I'd like to set up another meeting, and that would be up to you and Mr. Griffith as to when you have time, but we're gonna get into budget season too, so.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I put the budget.
I know.
So that
Okay.
everybody realizes what the commitments are.
So
going
we'll
forward.
we'll set up a meeting for September, one of the early weeks of
Yeah, I think
September.
we're gonna have to do it before we really get into the
Right.
crunch of the budget season. Okay,
Okay.
Ms. Radel.
Yes, so we have not met since the last update, other than the executive session with council last week. And there are no meetings scheduled at this time. We'll just meet as needed.
Okay, Ms. Saban, email policy. You're muted, Ms. Saban.
Sorry, that happened automatically, I guess. I haven't called Kendra and Walter for a meeting yet. I was going to wait until things settled down a little with the search committee and all the other meetings last week. I thought it'd be better just to wait it out for a couple weeks.
Okay. Ms. Howe.
The job description review committee, we met last week and we reviewed the draft job description, and there are some significant changes. So if you could take out the copy that was left at your place that was emailed to everybody also, we could talk about some of the changes that came from, and I'll say the majority of the committee, because I disagreed with some of them, but I was overruled. First of all, the title, we all thought that it should be changed to assistant to the clerk of council. It was originally titled administrative assistant, but we just thought it would be better to make it assistant to the clerk of council. And then the type was approved by council as a full-time position. The other two members of the committee felt that it should be a part-time position with up to 20 hours per week on a flexible schedule. We had originally approved a salary of $30,000 annually, but again, the will of the majority of the committee was to make it an hourly salary of between $18 and $21 per hour. And then there were just a couple suggestions that came from the Office of Law when they reviewed the draft. One of them was that we put that it's an at-will employee. And I think I did talk a little bit last time about how it's exempt service classification under the charter. So it's not someone who's in the career service as an administrative employee would be, or an executive branch employee would be. The other suggestion from the Office of Law was to add it directly supervised by the clerk of council, which was there, to add and or the chair of county council. And then the rest of it is we slightly changed the job description. So the job description is that it would be staff work performing varied assignments as an assistant to the clerk of council, responsible for performing a wide variety of staff assignments, many of which have a significant effect upon departmental policy. Work may include basic office tasks, preparation of documents, and other duties as assigned by the clerk. An assignment requires familiarity with the functions of the Office of Clerk of Council, legislative government operation, and government structure and protocols. The assistant works at the direction of the clerk of council, reports to the clerk of council. The assistant serves at the pleasure of county council and is subject to the same terms, restrictions. So that is, that last section is the same thing that we've had. And then required knowledge, skills, and abilities, we had just some slight changes here. And we had a suggestion from the Human Resources Department that we can add in here. The ability to carry out assignments requiring organization of material, proficiency with office productivity programs, minimum 2 years experience in office work or equivalent combinations, and positive interpersonal skills. And to that, I think a minimum requirement would be a high school diploma, that should be also listed in there as basic education. If anybody has any suggestions, we worked pretty steadily for our meeting and came up with this, and that's why we're here, to see if anybody else has anything to say. I will say that I was not in favor of making it a part-time position because I feel the workload is only increasing. And I thought it would be easier to get someone to take the job as a part-time position or a full-time position with benefits. The other two members of the committee felt otherwise, and so here we are with this. But it's going to be up to the majority of council to make it what we want it to be.
Do you think it's something that if we started out part-time, that we could turn it into a full-time? Would council be open to that?
Can do whatever you want. It's majority of council.
That was part of the discussion last Thursday.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, to grow it into. And I also want to say that, this was in consult with the current clerk of council about what assistance she needed.
Mhm.
It wasn't something that grew out of just one or two members. It was growing out of the person who's directly involved in the tasks of the county council office.
And I think it's important also to note, it's not a second clerk. It's not a second clerk position. It's an assistant to the clerk, someone that she can direct to do some of the things that'll free her up to do the actual job of the clerk. Because the clerk has very specific duties according to the charter. So I think anything is going to be a help. Part-time position, I'm sure, will be welcomed. I think that Ms. Lawrence is happy just to be getting to have some help in sight. Anyone else?
Mr. McGillen?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I attended the meeting for the job description committee, and I'm not happy about the fact that we're making it part-time. I think the reason that we wanted it full-time was, most importantly, and I do understand the clerk said there's some times where she doesn't really, there's some days where she may not need a full-time clerk to be there. So that was kind of the idea why we went part-time in the description. But I think a full-time position is better because, as Linda says, it's only going to get busier as we continually move forward in this government. It's only going to get busier, and the workload is going to get more and more and more. I understand that, there are going to be days when possibly there won't be enough work in the office for two folks to be there. I understand that happens all the time in all other offices as well. There are days where you have a slow period. That's understandable. That happens. But for the most part, I don't think you're going to run into that a lot in that particular office. I think the idea is if you have a full-time person, then you get somebody who Sharon could work with and possibly be able to take time off without being concerned, take a whole week off for vacation, not worry about, who's filling the position. And that way they're sure they have somebody there for the whole week getting the work done. So there's not an overabundance of work. I really think it deserves to be a full-time position. If in fact council doesn't want to make it a full-time position because there are days when Sharon doesn't need help, maybe we just need to think about making it a temporary position. just hiring a temp. Go to one source like we do at the Bureau of Elections on days when Sharon needs the extra help, and ask one source to send us some help for a couple of days and budget that money accordingly. And then you won't have any responsibility about worrying about tying somebody's schedule all up. I think the ability to get somebody on a flexible schedule will be difficult. I don't think it's fair for us to think that we're going to get somebody who's going to work all day Tuesday and take Wednesday off, and then maybe work on Thursday and take Friday off, and justify their schedule all around that. So I don't think it's fair to have a flexible schedule. If we want to make it part-time, we should make it 8:30 to 5 or 8:30 to noon, or noon to 4, whatever we need to do. But if the issue for making it part-time is there's days when Sharon won't need any help, let's just let her use a temp, give her a budgeted item, give her $20,000 to put in a budget, and hire a temp when she needs the help. I think that's a better way to go than to have a part-time worker.
Anyone else? Mr. Urban?
I mean, I have to concur that it should be full-time. Back in the commissioner days, you had 3 commissioners, 3 executive administrative assistants back in the day. The workload hasn't really changed in this county. I mean, I'm constantly critical of the documents that we do receive with typographical errors. Maybe somebody can catch those errors before they come to us. You know, it's one thing wasting our time too when you don't have final documents to vote on. I was just talking to Mr. Schneegans about this before, you know, during the break. You know, we're coming in here voting on documents that should be like executable copies. We shouldn't have to go back and amend things back and forth when, you know, if there's a wrong signature line or something like that on there. It's kind of a waste of our time. It should be caught in an administrative function in the back room before these documents come out to us. It's definitely, you know, the county government itself, from when home rule first started, it grew in numbers of employees in this county. It did not decrease. I mean, I know when my father left as a commissioner, the numbers were down, but slowly it's evolved into a little bit bigger government with more departments, more people. And having only one person, you know, Sharon deserves some quality of life. A second person would definitely be advantageous for us, so she can have some quality of life as a vacation. You know, and then to also have somebody just in case. What happens if she gets sick? What happens if something happens to her? God forbid that, you know. We need somebody to maintain that office and have the office still remain functional at all times. I think, you know, it's a very important office. You know, the charter does say the office of the county clerk, and obviously we have one main county clerk, but it's an office. There could be other positions in there that are doing other, you know, tasks for us. Especially, you know, one person could be taking documents if we need to review them for legal review, you know, on a proposed ordinance or resolution. They can be walking it over to the solicitor's office instead of tying up Sharon if she's doing the minutes or something like that. So I think it's just a parsing of duties. You know, all the copy work that she does, that's mundane work. You know, where I think she could be more effective at doing higher level items where the admin can do some of the like I said, you know, some of the mundane copy and put together the agenda and things like that. So it definitely should be full time at this point.
Okay. Just one comment. You know, the amount of work is certainly something that we should consider. But I think people forget when the home rule came into existence, the amount of work that was involved in getting home rule up and operating was quite a bit by a lot of people. And the clerk was able to accomplish that with support. So, I mean, yes, work is something, but you know, I don't think we've given due credit to the people who started this and really put in time. Ms. Check and Brittany Burgess, 2 people who they accomplished it.
I mean, there's still.
I think that that's something to be noted and something to realize that, you know, you start from zero. At least now we have a little bit of a foundation in place, which makes it a heck of a lot better as far as the work involved.
Yeah, Ms. Chet came in with some experience at that time though, because she
Right,
did work for
and
the commission.
a lot of council members, including yourself, Mr. McGinley, put in a lot of time in
I
those
still
early
do.
days doing that. We also did not have all the committees that we have now either.
No, and hopefully we'll be eliminating a few of these committees as we get the projects done, but I agree with that part of it.
Yeah, and it's just like the codification project, that's still been outstanding for how many years now, you know, I mean, things like that that have been sort of pushed off to the side, so the road could kind of get back on track.
Mr. Haas, on the blighted property?
Well, property now the report, Mr. Chairman.
Did you check with the Planning Commission and redevelopment about their representation?
No, I did not.
Could you do that, please?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Mr. Bowe, County Cares?
Yes, we met last Thursday, but nothing new to report. Thanks.
Thank you. Riverfront Parks Committee, Mr. Haas?
Yeah, I've not been notified by any meetings, but I did attend one of the riverfront events. Hats off to the county staff that made it possible. And to Eddie O'Neill, you know, and I just want to thank you publicly because the River Common looks like $1 million. You've really done a great job there and making that happen. I think it's contracted out, but I really personally appreciate that. I know the residents do that really enjoy that down there. So keep up the great work. And otherwise, still waiting to hear from the Riverfront Commons Committee.
Good. Public comment?
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark Rabo speaking.
Go ahead, Mr. Rabo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the Redevelopment Authority's representation on the Blighted Committee, I do believe Mr. Lindy is still our representative from the Redevelopment Authority. So just so you and Mr. Haas are aware and the rest of council are aware. Also, with respect to what the acting county manager said about the roads, the bridges on the southern end of Luzerne County, I wholeheartedly agree with her. I think that diverting truck traffic through Whitehaven would be disastrous, not only from an economic perspective, but also a quality of life perspective, because the attraction of Whitehaven in terms of its natural beauty is second to none. And if the state is going to put a toll road there to basically impede and basically deteriorate the quality of life in Whitehaven, that would destroy any tourism that would be able to be there. That's being in place. Also, with respect to the infrastructure funding for the watershed for the Chesapeake Bay cleanup, I do believe, Mr. Chairman, as the council spoke a few meetings ago with respect to the America Recovery Act money, I think that the state has allocated $230 to $240 million out of its $7 billion allocation from the America Recovery Act money for the Chesapeake Bay cleanup. And the Senate legislation is moving forward through the Appropriations Committee as we speak. So I think it is best to wait on the funding. I believe the plan should move forward, but I think the funding stream, as far as the utilization in terms of how you and the members of council are waiting till the final ruling, is prudent, because if the state Senate passes this funding stream for the counties for the Chesapeake cleanup, why wouldn't we be able to use that source as a match? And then we would free up money from the county's portion to use for other projects. So I think that's.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grable.
I'm finishing up, Mr. Chairman. So that is what I'm saying. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Other members of the public? We have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Mrs. Snee, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition, any abstentions, none heard, motion carries. Thank you very much.